Welcome everyone to today's social system mapping deep dive session for February 15th, 2021. I can't believe it's 2021, but it is obviously. Your hosts today are me and Kara is your tech support, and Lisa Negstad is helping me with our pattern spotting exercise today. For those of you who are new to this, we have 3 community practice sessions a month. The first one, which happens on the second Monday, is an on-ramp, which is an introductory level opportunity to see another mapper's map. For some people, it's the first time they ever look at a social system map. And for experienced people, it's an opportunity to see what each other's working on. This coming March 8th, actually it was empty, but Laura Castelli is going to share her map, and I can't remember the name of the network, but I'm looking forward to that because Laura's a lot of fun. So that'll be on the March 8th. And then today is the second monthly session, which is our deep dive conversation. This is definitely open to people who aren't familiar with social system mapping, but it's not an introductory session. So it doesn't always, we don't always have a map to look at, but we dig into some topic that has been emerging in the conversation of the overall network. Today, we're going to be applying the HSD, which is Human Systems Dynamics Difference Matrix, to social system mapping. And then the fourth Monday, we also have a tech talk, which is where we introduce new features of sumApp or how to do cool things in Kumu. And so that's sort of aimed at our more technical mapper hat wearers. And the next one coming up is February 22nd, which is next Monday. And we have a new data output that works with the Graph Commons platform. So we'll be showing you how to work with that, which we're pretty excited about the new opportunities that gives us. So in addition to those 3 monthly sessions, if you are more self-directed learner, there's some other opportunities. One is to be on our map, and we're going to actually be digging into this map today. And I have to turn down my space heater at my feet because I was starting to get hot. So this is a map of this community practice. And if you're not on it, I encourage you to click on the link that Kara has just put into the chat to opt into being on that map. It will give you a firsthand experience of what it's like to be a map member and go through that process, and you'll have the map to use as an example and to crib code from if you do that. Another way of learning more is to join our Slack team, which Kara will put a link to in our chat in just a second. Another one is we have an online knowledge base with lots of articles of how-tos, etc. Kara's putting links to everything I'm mentioning in the chat as I go, but she will also send a follow-up email within the next 48 hours with all the links that we talk about today. So if you're not in the mood to be grabbing those links right now, don't worry about it. You won't miss out. But if you are in the mood, go ahead and dig in at the moment. And then also we have recordings of recent sessions in our knowledge base. So there's a 1.5 years worth of different kinds of sessions you can go back and look at. And if you are really need to talk to somebody and you're stuck and confused, I devote a half an hour a week to what I call office hours, where I'm just on my Zoom link. It's every Thursday from 5 to 5:30 p.m. Central. And so if you you can just jump on, and just like, office hours in a college setting, I'm here and able to discuss whatever you want. You don't need to make an appointment, but just know the link will be in Zoom, but just know that if sometimes I do cancel, like this week, I'm not going to do it because this week I'm in trainings all week myself. And I'll put a cancellation in Slack. So if it's important to you, check Slack and see if I'm going to be on or not. Okay. We didn't think about chat intros, Lisa. Should we do something different? We thought about a bunch of stuff. But for starters, let's have you go ahead and put your name, pronoun, and location. I'm going to also stop sharing my screen for a second because I can't tell if it, okay, we do have more people. So let's have, I would love to just do a quick sound check. Phil, do you want to just unmute and say hi?
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Laura, do you want to say hi? I can't, did you say something? I didn't hear anything. Vocalize.
Yes, I said something.
More?
I just said hello.
Okay, it was really quiet. Okay, so Laura's the person who's sharing her map in the next on-ramp, just so you know. Garrett, welcome. Hi. Would you like to check in?
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. Pedro, hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello.
Crystal, just checking your sound so that you can talk if you need, if and when you need to. You want to say hi? No demand. Jim, you can say hi then.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Crystal, if and when you want us to hear your voice, feel free to say hello. And then let's have, most of you have already started in with your name, pronoun, and location, which is great. So from North Dakota to Germany to North Carolina, Indiana, Minneapolis, and other parts. I'm going to go back to share. Well, hang on. I'm not going to share. I'm just going to. So one thing, if you put in the chat, what you're hoping to take away from this session. Oh, and that's all I put for intros. And I think that's good. It's not good. It's lame. I admit it. It's totally lame. But that's what we got.
You probably don't mean lame.
Pardon me?
I said you probably don't mean lame, but
No, I can say lame about myself.
Yes, you
if I want to. Okay, so today's agenda is we just did intros. I'm going to talk a little bit about why pattern spotting is relevant and what we're trying to get at with this session. And then Lisa's going to walk us through some activities doing same and different in pattern spotting. And for those of you who I will, those of you who aren't familiar with our routine, we have a formal session designed to last an hour. At the top of the hour, those of you who need to leave, we'll stop and give you love for the rest of the day. And then if you, but I always stick around for an extra half an hour. So that if you have more questions or just want to continue the conversation or take it another direction, whatever you want to do, if you're interested in sticking around for that half hour, stay after the top of the hour, after everybody leaves, and then we'll, whatever happens will happen. Okay, so why pattern spotting? So I realized that we've been talking about like ways of seeing things in a map and sort of approaching things the way I tend to, which is like with a bunch of assumptions that I have not clarified out loud so that everybody knows what they are. And I'm just assuming we're all on the same page and maybe we're not. So this morning I sort of was like, okay, I think you need to approach this a little differently. So, oh, and before I jump into that, I just want to say to this community, for those of you who have not heard, the co-founder and heart and soul of Kumu committed suicide a couple weeks ago. And most of us heard about it yesterday because his brother, who's the other co-founder, put it in a newsletter. And I just wanted to take a moment to express how fundamental Ryan was to our work, what we do now. If he hadn't built Kumu, we wouldn't have built sumApp. And if I hadn't had the opportunity to help him think about Kumu from the very beginning, I mean, we used to go back and forth all day long about why is this like this and could it be like that, and watched him iterate and develop a tool. I learned so much about doing what we're doing now from watching Ryan and from interacting with Ryan. And he was such a wonderful guy, that he was like, we would not be doing what we're doing if it weren't for Ryan. So, and he was brilliant, and he was really helpful and wonderful. And he also had lifelong depression, mental health issues, which he was pretty open about, wrote about occasionally, which I really appreciated. And so yesterday was, that hit me kind of hard. And I just wanted to say how, Ryan up there, how much love I'm sending to you and how much I appreciate your life. So. Okay. So what I realized was that, so we've been doing this, what we call social system mapping, for about almost 6 years now. And what I run across over and over is that people see a map and they immediately say, so what do we do with it? What is it good for? What's it going to do for us? And I keep saying, well, nothing. I mean, it's what you're going to do. I mean, you have to make that. I can't, it's not going to do anything. You have to use it. But what I just, so as I was talking with Lisa this morning, I was saying it's the what tool. So if you think of what, so what's next, sumApp is a what tool that's unique, or not sumApp, but a social system app. And what I'm hoping to get at in this session, and, you know, just going forward, is the profound significance and importance and necessity of doing the what step. And so so I'm going to just talk a little bit about what we're getting at here, using a little bit of HSD theory, not because it's, I mean, there's lots of ways of approaching systems thinking, but just to ground it in how we're going to approach it today. So when we're doing social system mapping, we're generally doing it in the context where we're trying to build a network. And so what's a network? It's just a bunch of individuals with, we're trying to build a network that has some kind of change impact, that shifts the system generally. And am I still sharing? Okay. So we've got like all these individuals, right? And we all have this sort of sense, this intuition, and we're starting, you know, network science is now telling us that we can accomplish more of our share. Well, so there's this bunch of, boy, I'm doing a bad job, a bunch of individuals who have some kind of change that they want to generate. And we have this sense that we can change it, that we'll be better at impact making that change together than we are as separate individuals. So what we're trying to do is create this together. You know, how do we do this together? How do we create together? But we're kind of used to doing togetherness at a small scale of, like, you know, a team, like maybe a dozen people. But when we try to scale together bigger than that small scale, how do we do that? And how do we get to that? We're trying to create this larger whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And how do we do that? And so if we think about it, and I know you guys all know this, I'm just trying to lay a framework within which to talk about it. So how we get from this collection of individuals to something that's like this greater whole, it's the interactions, it's the exchanges. If we don't have exchanges and we don't have healthy, generative, robust exchanges across differences, we don't have a greater whole. And so, so if we look, you know, so we have, so like Jim and I like to talk about, Jim likes to talk about this, you know, there's the level of the me, and then there's the level of we, and then there's the level of us, or maybe I have it backwards. But really the thing that takes us from the individual to this greater thing is those connections. That's what makes the us level, the relationships. And so, but the thing is, we can't see the relationships. We can kind of know, you know, like I kind of know who knows who. If I look at all of you on the screen, I know that Jim and Laura know each other, and Phil knows because I've seen you in different contexts. But like then Garrett, I don't know who Garrett already knows of this group, and I don't know who he needs to know of this group. And people who aren't in this group, I don't know if they know who's in this group. So we can't actually see relationships except at a very close in, very minimal level. And so if that network of relationships is what's going to make this greater whole, and we can't see them, we're sort of at a loss. So I'm going to step, okay, set that aside. I'm sorry, I'm just practicing. This is just sort of came to me this morning. So as we try to get to that greater whole, what that greater whole is a complex adaptive system. So in a complex adaptive system, we don't have like straightforward, if we push this button, then that will happen. Change is actually really unpredictable. And it comes out of, there's a whole lot of different forces. And so we can't control it and we can't predict it. And so if we're trying to make this greater whole in this kind of a complex adaptive system context, there's a couple ways that it will happen. One of which is it can take a ton of time and energy and effort. We work to make this network. We work to make things be the way we want them. But the minute we stop putting in that effort, everything will shift back to its status quo. That's kind of one dynamic of a complex adaptive system is the effort that it takes to move it, and then its propensity to spring back. Or it can change dramatically really quickly if there's, depending on the underlying tensions that are building up. So the energy that's already hidden beneath the surface can just erupt, and then we can have things like, avalanches or uprisings, etc. Those, so you can't make those happen, but you can in a complex adaptive system. Oh boy, it's also clear in my head, and then it's like I start talking and I'm like digging a hole for myself. I'm noticing I'm doing that, so thanks for bearing with me. So if we can't control it, then what can we do? Are we totally helpless, or do we just have to throw up our hands and say there's no controlling, there's no predicting, so oh well, too bad, I give up? No, what we can do is we can do what in HSD is called adaptive action. So in adaptive action, the first step is so the whole point of adaptive action is to see patterns clearly, to really understand the patterns that exist in the current moment, that are what are currently holding the system in the shape that the system is in. So the system has its existing behaviors. And maybe those existing behaviors we're not even a network yet. We're just a bunch of individuals sort of bouncing around. But we're, so the first step in adaptive action is we see what the current situation is. We make sense of the current situation, and then we act. We take small steps to shift the system, because every small step we take changes the system. So if we try to get way out ahead, like in 10-year plans, we don't know what the system is going to be like even 2 months from now, let alone 10 years from now. So we take one step and then we look and see what happened, what's different now, what's it like now, and what's our next step. So it's a cycle of what. So first we're looking at the situation, what, and then so what, and then now what. And I know you've all heard those words. I've been hearing those words for like 12 years, the what, so what, now what, and I sort of take them very lightly and haven't, it's like, yeah, okay, what, so what, now what. But really what I'm realizing, especially when it comes to mapping, is we don't really do that what phase. I mean, we're like, especially Western people we're really quite programmed to see a problem and attack it without a whole lot of thought, or to just jump in and solve. So just like with theory U, how you don't just go from problem to solution, you go down, you dig deeper, you think harder, you think more deeply. So you do the what. So there's a resonance in between the what stage of HSD or adaptive action to that beginning, that downward slope of theory U. And so really all I'm trying to get at here is that when it comes to mapping, the reason people always say to me, well, not the reason they say, well, what is it going to do for us? Or, how is it going to help us? And I always say, well, I don't know. It's because we need to like get in the habit of doing that what, and really deepening what is that what stage. And just realizing that a social system map is is one of your what tools that can show you what is going on and what the patterns are currently on the ground in a way that you can't see in any other way. But if you're not interested in the what part of it, you're not interested in the map, because it's not going to do anything for you, because it's not going to do anything on its own except for give you some insights. And if those aren't insights you're actually interested in looking for, it's not useful to you. So thanks for putting up with my rambling, struggling, trying to say that more concisely. And I'm going to now hand it over to Lisa. So she's going to help us with some tools we can use and activities we can use for doing the what step with a social system map. And Lisa, do you want me to stop sharing for a moment?
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing for one moment? And I think we should just take a pause. I just captured very high level some of the things you were saying, Christine, in the chat. But I'm curious, I think let's take a pause and just see if there's any questions or reflections. I think we have a few minutes for that. And just to see kind of where we are before we go into pattern spotting, which is a great step to do in your what step when you're looking at a social system map, is to look at those patterns. So let's just stop. There's a question here. You don't think mapping is an action?
It is an action, and I just think that there's that what happened, like this cycle of, yes, it definitely is. There's the action of gathering the map, and there's the action of making it and exploring it. And I think that what happens in many cases is that what stage gets lost. So it's not like the action isn't also part of the cycle, but the whole cycle, we tend to just want to know what to do now without thinking about what currently exists and understanding that, and then trying to shift the dynamics. And so it's not that there's no action, but a map can be used to inform that action. But that's a step that people aren't, like, people often ask me to, like, they'll say things like, well, I think you should make an algorithm so that the algorithm can find who I should know in this network and introduce me to that person. And I'm like, well, okay, there's a lot of those algorithms that already exist out there, but what that does is that removes from you the step of actually doing your own thinking, and for you to figure out what is like, sometimes what you need to do is reach out to somebody who has things in common with you, and sometimes you need to reach out to somebody who's very different from you for various reasons. And I don't think the algorithm, I mean, maybe it could know all that, but I don't like the idea of us as human beings not having that capacity, like taking that capacity away from us and taking that choice away from us. So I guess maybe I should have asked more about what you meant by action.
Well, I think one thing is, it is just so iterative that mapping might be one of your actions. And
Yeah.
right now and today, what we're talking about is, once you have that map, how do you work with a group that needs to own their own understanding? And so that action could have been an action that you decided with your network. Oh yeah, let's get a visualization of our network. Let's start to help see the system and especially see those invisible dynamics that happen in our network. Yeah.
And it is in and of itself. So Rachel, I see your comment, and it is in and of itself an intervention. It is a step that impacts the system. Already it impacts people's thinking and their imaginations. And it does enable them to start to see those underlying connections. And I guess what I'm saying is, we can continue to deepen that. And this activity that Lisa is going to take us through is one way we can do that, to help continue that cycle deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, and there's some good comments in the chat too, just
Yeah,
illuminating more.
yeah, the self-agency and that kind of gets at, the algorithm idea. I mean, part of the whole point of social system mapping is to create agency from the ground up and create the ability from the ground up of everybody in the network to know how to do an adaptive action cycle. So we can do it from the perspective of my current personal needs, or I can do it from the perspective of, what will help the whole system. But usually the paradigm is especially with social network mapping, is we're going to have some top-down experts who do some social engineering. And that is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to enable everybody to do their own engineering, to create their own place in the network and do their own contribution to make the network healthier and stronger. And that an algorithm isn't going to teach us how to do. That's about actually the practice of pattern spotting and thinking about the patterns and thinking about where can I step into these patterns in a way that feels generative for me. So what we're talking about here is a way of training a whole network in a way that hopefully increases their agency and their capacity to think systemically. Okay.
I think what we're kind of identifying too in some of the conversation and in the chat is the adaptive action cycle is often most helpful in identifying the question you want to ask. It helps you kind of hone in on the questions that you might want to ask too. So, and Jim put some examples of those up in the chat, but it helps. Yeah, it helps the system see itself better, but it's not just a final conclusion because there is so much complexity in it. It's more identifying those open questions, the inquiry points. But what we're going to talk about is the pattern. Do you want to share the screen again, Christine? We're going to share one tool, one method you can use in that what stage to look at a social system map and flesh out what you're seeing in it. And hopefully see some of those invisible pieces. And it's a pattern spotting. So this is how to spot patterns. There's different things to look for. And we thought we'd just kind of show each one and give a moment that we can go and look at the map of, what do we call that officially, that map that we're going to use? It's the social system
mapping community
ecosystem. Yeah, community practice and ecosystem map. And Kara's going to put that in the chat for us if you want to go and look at it while we're doing this pattern spotting. It's a good example of a map to use while we're doing that. And so how do we notice patterns? I mean, for a lot of us, we probably just start to see things happen and we say, oh, there's a pattern happening, but there's some ways we can think about them. And one is that one spotter is generalization. So when can we see things that tend towards commonness, right? Like in general, I noticed this about our network. And so let's start with that one, give you a chance to go into the map. Now, if you're kind of new to the maps, you can go ahead and just take time digging around. We're not going to take time here since this is a deep dive to actually show you how to navigate the maps. So if you're kind of new to those, we just invite you to go and look and see what you can see. Those of you who know this map or are a little more familiar with some of the social system maps, we'd like you to go in and invite you to use different views and see what generalizations you're noticing in this network of social system mappers, really. And what generalizations you're seeing, and we're going to have you put that in the chat. We'll just gather those in the chat and it'll give you a couple minutes to go look at that map and do some digging and start with that pattern. We're going to do 3 other patterns too after this.
And just to,
yeah, go ahead.
Any view is fine. So for those of you who know, like the side panel has a bunch of different views. So just pick, feel free to go to whichever views interest you and look for generalizations there. Or any and all views are game.
So you see some generalizations in the chat. Wondering if there's a few more before we go to the next pattern. Some of them take a little digging. Depends on how much time you have. Do you think we're ready to go to the next pattern? Looking at you, Christine, too. See.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you share the slides again?
Oh, yeah, hang on. Sorry, I stopped because I wanted to look at the map and I knew everyone was.
Yeah, we'll kind of go back and forth, I think.
Oops. Yeah. Okay.
I noticed having, like, for myself, I was having assumptions too, but I didn't have time to check it out on the map, but I was assuming, one of the generalizations I was assuming is the kind of work people are doing, the kind of backgrounds people might have or doing in this network. And that's something we could check out. So you'll see the list that we have there, but let's go to the next one, which is contradictions. So on the one hand, we see this, but on the other hand, we see that, right? Or it might just be like an exception is standing out from the rest. So where are you seeing the contradictions in this network? And if you want to just take a little time again and go to the map, see what contradictions you're seeing and put those in the chat. Some of them came out a little bit when we were doing generalizations because you can see the general and then you saw the contradiction. So you already saw that come out a little bit in the chat, but let's see if there's a few more. And again, if you want to stop sharing screen, and I'll put that in I'll just put what we're looking for in the chat.
Thanks. I was just going to, but
Okay. So these are good contradictions coming up. One thing I'm noticing too is that we all know this with social system mapping, that that's why the more people who complete their connections and their relationships and go and keep updating the map is going to be helpful in this kind of pattern spotting, because some of that, like I was really digging in the relationships and the level of collaboration or generative, and part of it might just be they haven't filled their connections in yet, right? So we have to just be aware of that. And I'm seeing how, you know, maybe engaging the network with some looking at patterns can also be a way to motivate them to keep the map updated as well. So Christine, what are you seeing in the chat around contradictions?
I mean, it's yeah, like what I'm seeing is just the dynamic of me and Jim a little bit, or Jim, mostly me and Jim sort of being at the core of all of it. And they're sort of, in both the generalizations and the contradictions are pointing toward just the not very generative structure.
Yeah, it's great. It's helpful to see that. All right, let's look at, if you could share the slides again, Christine. We got 2 more pattern spotting. So we're in this what stage. Just to remind people, we're in the what stage, like just exploring the reality in front of us of this group, of this network of social system mappers. So another one is surprises. I am surprised about this, or I wasn't expecting this, or I was expecting this and it didn't happen. Just take a look again at the map for any surprises. Like you come in with a certain assumption, you come in with certain expectations, and they're not there. And let's look at the map again with that and put that in the chat.
Did I stop sharing? No. Yeah.
These are great. Let's go to the last pattern spotter. Say that 3 times fast. And if you're seeing other patterns as we're showing each one, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So the last one that can help us, can you go to the next one? Yeah, is puzzles. Just like, what am I wondering about, or things that I'm kind of confused by. That's our last one that we're going to introduce. So again, looking at the map, what's puzzling you? Go ahead and put that in the chat. These are great. I'm having fun reading these.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of great pattern spotting and insights coming from them. So on this what step, what we can do now in the adaptive action cycle is go to the so what. So start to look and see which one has the most juice or which one has the most energy in it. So let's go and look through the different patterns. So you can go up to the very first one when we started with generalizations. You're going to have to scroll through the chat. Also, Christine and I are going to be looking at these. Maybe we could pull out a couple that you feel like have the most energy or juice and put those in the chat. And that's like if you were kind of doing this with a network or group of people from your network, this is a step where you'd kind of see what's most, even where there's most tension, maybe.
Yeah.
You're looking for that, and then that's where you can dive in and figure out a next wise action. So let's go and look at that and take a little time here, a couple minutes to go scroll through all those patterns and just put the one that has the most energy or juice or tension for you in the chat. So what are we thinking, Christine?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the two that stick out for me are Jim's question about, where did it go? What the purpose of the social cohesion as a learning community is. I'm always struggling with that in terms of cohort training program cohorts. Is that really a change network, or is that more of a social network? But then, but the real thing that sticks out for me here is that just what transactions are needed or aren't there that. So what kind of transactions?
That would help the social cohesion, or that would.
Yep, that would help the social cohesion.
I'm putting the 2 here. So one thing we just wanted to show you in the last time is what you could do with this then is go to a same different as your so what step. Like now, like, so what's most important? What is most jumping out at us? What is a difference that would make the most difference right now as we look at those 2 pieces? So maybe if we looked at number 2, what transactions, that should be plural, what transactions are needed or aren't there that would help the social cohesion that aren't there yet? And if we had time, one of the things you could do, if it worked or not, can you show your screen again, please, Christine, and show the same different? Is you could dive in and do a same different with this one pattern and say what is currently similar. What transactions are similar or working, or you could do what aren't working. What's another way to do a same different here, Christine, with that? What transactions are there, aren't there? It's basically doing difference around that exchange of the transactions.
Say the one you just said. I'm sorry. What was, Lisa, what was the one you just said? As your example?
So we could do a same, I don't think it's great, so that's why I'm trying to get some help here. So what's a same different we could do around maybe the whole group can help here. What the transactions are needed or aren't they that would help? So we're looking at those transactions to help with social cohesion
Yep.
and to use the same different for there. Maybe we could look at what's similar about those who are more connected in the network and what's different. That might be a place to focus it. There might be something else that is emerging from this that's really jumping out at you and is an action that you could try, but you want to spend a little time in that so what step to see which would be most, which is having the most tension, which is, and so with the transactions are needed, like we'd probably want to dig into that, like which ones have seemed to really help the cohesion and which ones haven't. What do you think, Christine?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I also think another same different would be the difference between our roles in the network.
Yep.
And what's same and different. And so what's same and different about what we need from the network as individuals.
Yep.
So our needs. What's same and different about what we are able and willing to offer to the network. Maybe what's same and different about what we each need to be invited into the network, or to be liberated to, I mean, as Derek was further up mentioned, he needs an introduction. So is that, what's same and different about how people need to be folded in, what actions they need.
Yep.
Other people, feel free to chime in. You don't have to just write it if you would like to talk.
See what's happening in chat. So then at this point, and especially given time, there would be like, is there an action that you're seeing come out of this? When you look at those same different, if there was time with same different, what you'd probably do is list all the similarities and differences. And what you're wanting to do is just see which one. It's like another layer to dig in about which one is that you actually the difference that can make a difference, the one that you actually have influence over though. If you don't have influence or control over it, you know, you leave it aside, but something that you would have influence and control over. So if we looked at that list on the so what, there's 3 different ones that we put there. Is there an action that's coming forward that, you know, this community could try? All done in this very shortened time frame. Show you the method. So when I go to look at that so what step, as we think about the same and different of what's needed from the network as individuals, what are we able and willing to offer? What do we each need to be invited?
Mhm.
You know, I could see an action of saying, well, one thing is I'm going to go and update my connection. But then once maybe we all just agree we're going to update our connections and invite one other person that we know in this network to go and update their connections. This might be the one simple thing we do, but that's just an example. I'd love to hear what other actions you're coming up with. Probably might be more profound than what I am. Yeah.
Mary suggesting new survey questions, and I agree with that.
Excellent.
Yep.
For me, I really appreciate this call, and also some of the previous calls where we actually worked with the map during a call. Like for me, that is a really great start of what we did today. I think everyone on the call already got wherever they were with the map, they got a little step deeper. So I think that's something that's working and that we can do in those regular calls, updating our own answers and connections for sure. And for me, one of the questions that really I was stuck after our pattern recognition journey was, what is like small actions that I can take, that we can take, that create a little bit more connection or a little bit more collaboration? Because I think we're all busy. There's always this time thing. And I don't expect, this network to like magically change overnight and be, whatever. But what is something small that actually creates some value? So looking more at the small little things that we can do consistently instead of like some big massive shift that's maybe more idealistic than practical. So I think, the calls or updating, or the other thing I think for me was also, if I have something to give or to ask, to take initiative to do that, because that at least creates an opportunity for something, for some kind of transaction or exchange. So kind of taking, I don't know, the courage or the initiative to ask something or to offer something, for example, on Slack or, in a call or something, to basically create a surface that invites some kind of interaction.
This is great. Lisa, I'm going to jump in and just because we have people need to jump off at the top of the hour. And so I'm going to stop sharing and just let's all unmute and say goodbye to those who need to leave so they feel like their departure is recognized. And then anyone who wants to stick around for another however long. If you're going to unmute, go ahead and do it. Oh, Nadia already left us. I was hoping to say goodbye to her. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Have a wonderful
Thank you so much,
day.
everybody. Bye. Have a great week.
Looks like we have a number of people sticking around. Okay.
One thing I was just noticing in some of the actions was some of the actions are related to the map and some of the actions are related to the network itself, like to help enhance the network itself. So that was just one thing I was kind of leaving that conversation noticing.
Yeah, one thing that Laura said is, a desire to pick apart the map more, just to work with it together as a group, like we were doing a lot of this. And then, it seemed like the other part of the conversation was really about, okay, so given what the map is showing us about the network of how we are, what about that? And we sort of went down that small cohesion or cohesion track.
I can say I appreciate this deep dive today. I'm definitely, like, at the very least, I'm a little bit deeper engaged in this map, and I'm also taking away some of these questions and patterns that I might be asking in other networks that I work with. So what Lisa and Christine, what you shared is definitely, like small little activities and prompts that can be easily done in a Zoom call, like we just did with a lot of different networks, right? Like they're not very specific to a specific kind of network. And that's definitely something I'm taking away from this call, also based on the intentions that I have, and that's great. And yeah, and I'm curious to see what else comes out for our map and our group of people as well, which I think probably takes some more time to even digest everything that's in the chat. I feel that's already a good start. But it's definitely like the hour was too short for like.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
But great to get inspired, and as I said, like I'm definitely taking things away that I will be probably playing around with in the future. So that's great.
Good.
I don't know. I was just curious about Derek had brought up this theme about building cohesion, and I was just wondering if he would say more about.
Okay, sure. Hi, you guys. So I love these conversations. Thank you. And I have not reached out to any of you, partially because you're all busy and so am I, and that's a good reason, right? It seems like as I get older, my social network in some cases is larger, and in some cases it's very, very narrow. And seems like it's webs inside of webs inside of webs. So I will reach out to some of you if you don't mind. You can respond or not, but I'll do it through the map. So social cohesion, I'm very interested in this from I do direct work with the young people and communities around the world, and mostly in the U.S. and Western Canada. And we are mapping networks. We call it the youth support card. We have a way to measure the protective factors and the social cohesion of teenagers, and we're teaching them how to be very intentional with their social network as a way to increase resilience. And we've been doing it for 20 years. I work with. I'm from the reservations, and so I'm very familiar. My whole career has been built on kinship networks, and so it's a different than the traditional Western family model. And so social cohesion in my work, we use the acronym CREWING, CEREWING. We teach the kids who's crewing your web, and we are teaching them that inside of this adaptive action system. And my wife is Laura Williams, who's a protege of Glenda's, and so some of you may know Laura. And so we're teaching kids to understand that within each of these boxes of crewing, class, race, educational aspiration, or attainment, worldview, interests, neighborhood, and gender, that their relationships are going to be expressed differently, and to be adaptive, they're going to have to kind of have a bigger lens, especially when you're young, on how to approach somebody to get this social cohesion to happen. Because for a young person who isn't blessed by an intact, loving, supportive family, which, let's face it, most human beings aren't blessed by that, how do we support the teenagers in kind of taking what's invisible to most people, that's their social network, how do we make that visible so they actually can respond to it and within it, instead of just be buffeted about by it or the lack thereof? And so we grapple with these issues all the time. And you know what's cool is the more fundamental I get in my communities with the more grassroots with young people, they get it way more quickly than my superintendents and my grant funders do. Kids go like, duh, that's obvious. Whereas the grant funders are pretty much sometimes get flabbergasted by the work that we're doing. So, Jim, far more than you asked for, and I apologize, but I'm going to reach out to you on email if you want. We can have a call if you want, and to talk more about this. Christine, we're long. We need to have a call soon, because I do think as I participate and kind of just lurk and watch what you guys are doing, I think I know what's in it for me. I can see the value for what I do with kids. I can show you our instrument to be proud to. I'm not too sure what's in it for you. You're pushing the theoretical far farther than I. I mean, fascinated by it, but my kids needed to be pretty practical. Otherwise, I don't get to move their lives. And so I'm probably on the other end of that. It's just like, how do you make a incorrigible 15-year-old who's been busted in California because of cannabis? How do you make him understand how adaptive action can actually change the trajectory of his life? And that's not hyperbole. That's literally a grant that I'm working on right now. And the truth is, it works. It matters to that kid in Monterey or Santa Cruz, and they get it. It's just they never thought of it that way before. So good on you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
I just want to say a thing that just came up for me about what you just said, Derek, which is, so I'm going through the HSD certification training session right now, and which I've been exposed to I've known Glenda for a long time, and I've been exposed to most of the models and methods and had more informal trainings. But so I'm just doing it sort of again in a more formal fashion. But one of the things that occurs to me over and over again as I do this work is, so I grew up in very bad circumstances, chaos, crappy family, lots of trauma. And to me, attending to patterns and attending to what's around the corner are absolute survival skills. And so often people will talk about systems thinking and all these dynamics, and they act like it's so strange and so different. And what that tells me is that they haven't actually had that much chaos in their life, and that survival has not been an issue for them the way it has and so I just think of like kids who grew up in chaos and trauma are actually hyper vigilant about the social patterns, the underlying tensions, and what's coming next, because they always have to be prepared to get out of the way. And so so for those 15-year-olds who all you're actually doing is giving them language to understand what they're already doing intuitively, and helping them understand the value of it, and helping them focus it into productive areas, as opposed to like when I was growing up, I kept getting told I was crazy, or I shouldn't be like this, or I was neurotic in this way or that way. And actually, like, I just go through these training programs. I'm like, no, I actually just had a crappy upbringing and learned how to survive. I'm actually just pretty damn resilient. But it wasn't until I was in my, late 40s that people started having language that affirmed that for me and made me feel like I don't need to keep trying to be something I'm not, which is something that requires more rigidity. So I just wanted to say that, because I haven't said that really to people. And I was thinking that last week as I was listening to a thing with Glenda. I was like, yeah, no, some of us are being really quiet here because we don't get the problem you're all having. Like we understand vigilance. We understand like sensing, like we're kind of like feeling like outsiders because everybody's talking as though this is so new and different and so dramatic. And I'm like, so anyway, not to be sort of judging of other people, but there's this dynamic of where you come from that informs your assumptions, and that when the dominant conversation goes away, it goes anyway. So yes, those 15-year-olds actually can grab it and run with it and feel really strong if they just aren't talked down to while they're being told it, which I'm sure you don't do. So back to the other discussion we were having. Derek says he's going to reach out. That would be great. And other thoughts? So Phil, you were going to say something before I jumped in and started yammering.
No, that was great. I guess, yeah, back to kind of the on the technical edge is the whole idea of the Kumu presentations and the use of presentations to kind of walk people through a particular exploration or kind of see different edges of the map that they might not necessarily stumble into, just from that kind of primary gateway. Have you created any presentations that might help people, either long-standing members of the community or new members, start to kind of guide them through some explorations of the map? And that's the first question, which is more direct. But the second, and I don't know if there's any way to make this possible for us as members of the map to do this, but as people were kind of doing the exercises today, it would be really cool if people could actually walk. I'd be fascinated to see people's different lines of inquiry expressed in like a presentation where it's showing here the typical, these are the map views that I'm seeing in the questions that are coming up for it. And you can do screenshots and stuff, but I don't know if there's that capacity for somebody other than the map owner to create a presentation from it. That's the second question.
I don't know if anybody else has had experience with the presentations. After I did that whole thing last year about Kumu presentations, and I was trying to make a presentation for a client, and it has a bug that makes it like every time you try to do a map view, it just reverts all the map views to the new one. So it changes all of them rather than, so you end up with only one map view. I've pinged them and they said it was a bug and they'd get it fixed, but they haven't gotten it fixed. And I'm not expecting quick action on that currently. So there's technical challenges, but what you just said would be really fascinating and great. Maybe it could be a video.
Yeah, I did one Kumu presentation once to try it out and play with it. And I've recently now I've recorded a video where I just screen share and show things and record it as a video, which I think also really worked. So I'm kind of testing both options to kind of, guide people more on an introductory level, but maybe also with some kind of deeper exploration questions. I think can be good tools.
So I was wondering if anyone, so we just did this wonderful exercise. At first I thought it was a total flop, and I was like, no one's seeing anything. I don't see anything. Flop. I was like, oh God. But actually I felt like, then I was like, oh, this is, yes, okay, yes, now we're getting to what's valuable, what we need to think about. So I was happy about that. And then there's I can see all this stuff going past in the chat, and I'm realizing it would, if I had the bandwidth for me to go through and digest this and turn it into something and then actually take action, would be really wonderful. And I also know that given my life at the moment, I'm not likely to do that. And so I just wanted to say, if anyone else feels inspired to do that, I would welcome that. And one of the things I'm trying to do differently is simply be really explicit about the implication that someone's going to do something with this useful stuff. I mean, I see this in networks a lot where there's all this good, really valuable information. And then the two core people go, okay, that's great. We'll do something with it. Or, or they don't even say that, but it's just implied to everybody that, Christine's going to take this and do something with it. And I'm really working on just saying, I think that would be wonderful. And I probably won't. So if anyone thinks it's wonderful enough to do it, I mean, that's what I'm not asking anybody to, but I'm just saying if anyone would like to. And I would support, if there's changes to do on the map, I will be responsible for making changes to the sumApp survey. Or, I will definitely be willing to participate, but not drive. And with attention to how much participation it requires from me. So I just am saying, putting that out there, because it seemed like a really valuable bunch of stuff.
I'm willing to harvest it. And we just, as you said, need to broadcast it to this group so that you're not the sole person receiving it, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds good. And
that's great.
Thank you. Yes.
I was noticing too that you know, Christine and I were trying to just make it simple, but I think the chat was too much. Like it would be much easier to have, like in the future, if we were doing this, to have those columns of the different patterns maybe and see it instead of, you know, in the chat was pretty hard to go back and digest quickly. So I was just noting that for future if I was doing this on Zoom with people.
So we'll do that next time.
Yeah, good learning. Thanks,
You know,
Mary, for volunteering.
In a Miro board?
Or a team retro,
A what? Team
Yeah.
retro?
like that. Weren't you part of that one? Yeah, with the team retro. That was pretty simple, I thought.
Mhm.
Well, what do other people think? We've used Mentimeter, we've used Miro, and we've used Team Retro. We don't have to decide tools right now, but
I think Team Retro had the most least amount of resistance in terms of tech sensing of what's going on.
Or even just a Google Doc
Yeah.
or Google Slide.
Mhm.
Google Slide, yeah.
Would definitely be easier to like see things as we kind of are in the call, because the scrolling in the chat, like it's so small and then you're like constantly
Yeah.
is moving up and down. Yeah. Now also, I don't know how much time I will have, but I will see. And if I have some time and energy, I might also dig into what came out of this one and see. I think it could, like, one way to digest it would also be to like map out some possibilities for engagement, because I think sometimes people just don't take the step to think how they could be more engaged.
Mhm.
So if there is some, at least like a starting point, no, like it's not, of course, not all inclusive. There are many million ways always, but like a starting point for people who are like, okay, you're new and you're interested, you're joining the map. So here are 10 other actions that you can take after you're on the map.
Mm.
Even just that, for people to start thinking, they don't have to do all of those. They might do 5 others that are not part of the list, but I think that could be maybe something that we can pull out of the conversation today. Or I was also thinking, like, I'm working with another network where I've also created the map. So I have like a role where I'm more kind of stewarding and moving things in that network, right? So that takes some of my capacity. But I don't know if there's anybody like in the group, like not in our call now, but like in the whole group that is interested to try and learn more, but doesn't have a network where they're already doing this.
Yeah.
So maybe then they could do it for this SMM, because otherwise you're doing it for so many different networks. Like at some point it just gets too much, right? But if there's somebody who's like, I really want to learn this, but I don't have like a network that I'm already doing this with, or a client that pays me to do this, I just want to learn a little bit and, you know, like try things out and make mistakes, and there's not really a cost or a risk to it, right?
Yeah.
That could be another way and might be a really good fit for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Along those lines, you know, if social cohesion also was one of the goals, besides, you know, what you just laid out, Laura, about learning about views, learning about Kumu code, learning about decoration, whatever. But if there was another purpose around building social cohesion, then you would invite people from the network weaving Facebook group in and say, hey, if anybody wants to practice weaving skills, here's and interested in networks, you know, here's a group. But also that brings up in my mind, so again, to what purpose creating social cohesion in this group? And I just go under the assumption that the more cohesion, the more relationships that are built, the more resources that are in any network start flowing and emergent activities happen that you don't know exactly what and why, but that if the network fabric is stronger and more resilient, good things happen, just because innovation, ideas, information flows in unexpected ways. That's not a direct purpose, but it's sort of clustered around the idea of we're interested in maps, we're interested in how relationship networks achieve purpose. And so if you're in this community, you're probably here for something around that reason. And so maybe there's affinities that you have with these people that are useful.
I am wondering, I think someone mentioned time, and I think time is really important, that this really takes an investment. And so many people were interested in community, being part of the community. And yet I somehow felt that we're dealing with the same challenges in this that we experience in the outside world, so to speak, that this mind shift or whatever is sort of what we're grappling with right now. That, you know, there are so many people involved in social change, and the landscape of the map, it's just amazing, but it requires interest and investment on our part. I'm in the past month or two, I've wondered why we are resistant to taking time, investing time. And part of it is with busy lives and funders, and you know, there can be a lot of reasons, but yeah, part of why I'm willing to do a little more is sort of wanting to sort of grapple with that and learn more and make an investment. So it's like the social capital part. I think some survey questions around, I think it's clear some people just see the map as a tool. And then, as I mentioned, some more interested in community and like-minded people. But could we create some survey questions that really let us know, for instance, if that they're open to having people connect with them? If people just don't have the time, then it's good to know that they're not interested in that.
Can I follow up on that, Mary? Are you?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay. So one quick thing that came to me is I think in some way or another it comes back to purpose. You know, is it just a tool? Is it for learning? How much is it for community? How much is it professionally? Like if you do work with it professionally, if the map would get you new clients or whatever, like that would be a way to get more interested, right? To also maybe have some money, so you're willing to give some time for free, whatever, you know, like depending on where you're at, or it helps you because you learned something that you didn't know and you get support to learn or whatever. So I think that the purpose, and then, you know, all of these questions after is something that I come back to again, and it's not new because it comes up in different conversations. But I just wanted to mention that. And while you were speaking, Mary, I had like an image or an analogy. I also work with like gardening and permaculture and agriculture, and building soil is as foundational as building connections, right? Like if you're working with land, building soil is one of the key things that you invest in. Same like building connection for any team, community, network, organization is. And it's similar also linking it to what Jim said, that you need to build soil, and then a lot of good stuff can happen. You don't necessarily know what and when and how exactly, but it's like without it, you can't grow nothing.
Mhm.
And with soil building, there is kind of an interesting number which a lot of people experience on their land, that up to, so the organic matter content is one of the key indicators that you can look at when it comes to soil health and aliveness, right? And similar to like quality of relationships, cohesion, that kind of thing on a social level, the kind of ecological level. And you need about 5% of organic matter in soil for it to start working on its own. So from 0 to 5, you need to invest, and you need to do like give years and put more compost and more fertilizers and like all of the good stuff. You just need to give and give. You're not going to get much back at all. But once you reach this 5, it will actually start increasing by its own, and you can reduce your input. And I think there's a similar, like, I don't know the number, but there's a similar tipping point in social systems too. Like from 0 to a certain point is just giving, and you're not going to see much at all. And then at a certain point, there's enough connection and cohesion and all of that stuff that it starts growing and expanding on its own. And I think that's an interesting, that just came when you were speaking to me as like an image and this analogy to soil experience that I have, which I think there are some parallels to social systems. And yeah, just having an awareness, I think, is interesting. And also working with networks, like, is the network at a stage where we're still in this investing, like up to the 5%, or is it already there? And it's like, even if you do nothing, over time, something will come out anyways. And then for sure, even after 5%, some investments are really worthwhile, but they're not as required. Like you're kind of out of the emergency hospital room. Like the patient is alive, they're recovering. Certain things might speed it up, but they're not about to just like die on you. And up to 5, you're really in an emergency situation. And I think in many ways, socially, we've also lost so much of community and villages and kinship and whatnot, that we are really on a bare minimum when we're operating. So that was just an image. Maybe it's helpful for our group and for you.
I like that image, and I think the best compost is what you use from your own land. And going back to small acts, you can't make compost if you're using large pieces. It needs to be small things that compost over time.
I love this metaphor. It's exciting to me
I know.
that, you know,
it's
and if there was a measure of sort of what the outcomes you were looking for, like more spontaneous creation of activity by people in the network, if that was your outcome, then you could go back and say, well, if we create a more transitive network, a more connected network, and if our hypothesis was the more connected it is, the richer it is, and the more spontaneous things happen, and or the level of depth of relationship moving up through generative interaction to collaborations was another indicator. If that was your hypothesis, that if you increase those transitivity and depth of relationship, that you get these outcomes, you could see it from the map. You could use it as an evaluation tool, and then you could design interventions that say, so how do we create greater transitivity? How do we create greater depth? That would be interesting with my sociologist hat on. And this is the tool that could make that visible. But
I was just thinking for compost too, you need, along with small things cut up, you need warmth and you need moisture. What else, Laura?
And
I
air.
feel like air,
Air,
yeah.
water,
Yes.
water, small stuff, bacteria.
Yes. Yeah.
interdependence.
What'd you say, Jen?
Interdependence. So, you know, when you break up the soil, turn it over, dig it up, that mixes, but it also breaks all these micro biome connections, these tiny little connections between the tiny pieces. So there's a lot of people that I think in permaculture that create crops and stuff, and they just let it go rot, mulch back into the soil without really digging it up. And I don't know how that plays out in terms of, you know, relationships and stuff. But it might play out in the sense, you know, in liberating structures, you're like moving people around all the time, which sort of reminds me of the soil being turned over as opposed to staying in breakouts for a longer period of time and having people deepen the relationship through conversation. And
I've been thinking about, like, just with our sense making community practice, about just the dynamic of coherence that, so like in liberating structures, when you keep moving people around, what happens to cohere? Like, how do you build coherence when, like, when we have a different facilitator every single time, and the different facilitator maybe wasn't even there missed the last four. So like, how do you build when everything keeps moving? And so what needs to be held in place? What needs to be held stable so that something can, so that you can generate some coherence? And, you know, like the balance of not becoming so coherent that it's deadening and rigid and brittle, but not being so liberating and flexible that it can't cohere and you can't ever get any depth or make any get any momentum in building. So it's like that tension in like, that's a big thing I'm grappling with currently in a lot of places. But
that's another good element. I think this is all like good food for thought. And I'm happy my image like landed well with you and you can kind of relate to it. And I think it's interesting, you know, since we're working with systems, these are all different dimensions of this system work.
Yeah. Well, and I'm appreciating, like, and I need to go quick, but I just want to say, Mary, I totally very much appreciate your willingness to harvest again, and appreciate the quality of your harvesting and the depth of thought you give to it. So that's wonderful. And I'm also just sort of noticing, like, each of you have sort of said something along the lines that I think is maybe, well, you know, like, if we can use ourselves as a learning experience, so that we're like, Jim, when you're talking about that purpose, like, the purpose maybe isn't to do a specific outcome, but the purpose is for us to deepen our understanding of how systems work and how we can engage in networks to help them become more generative. Then I was thinking, like, Laura, you're saying how you're doing stuff over here in this network and doing it here, you like, time becomes an issue. And I have that same concern. And at the same time, I feel like if there's things I can learn there and bring here, then that saves me some time. Or if there's things that we can generate together that then we can all take back. I mean, my dream is that we all learn how to really amplify our efforts and make our energy have a bigger impact. And then so that we can each take it back to these other networks and make them help support them being more generative. Then that's worth the effort. I mean, to me, that's worth the time spent here in this particular experiment. So I'm kind of here, I was hearing that, a little bit of that, a resonance of that from each of you. And so I just wanted to recognize that and affirm that and appreciate that. Yeah. Anybody have anything else to say before we jump off? Because I need to go soon.
I think it's a great purpose for us to be just making compost and yeah.
Everyone good?
So the metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Have a great week.
Yep. See you next
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.